Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you enter today, I would love to welcome you to shout out your name and where you're joining us from. We were just talking as we were preparing for this about how beautiful it is that we can be all over the country. We're literally on the East Coast in Charleston, in Detroit, in the Midwest, and in LA on the West Coast. So I keep getting reminded what a beautiful thing that is. Milwaukee, that's not too far from Detroit, right? I don't know my Midwest geography very well.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go there and back in the same day. Ooh, somebody from Holland, Michigan. Now that's only like 3.5 hours away.
There
from
we
me.
go. Oh, Savannah, Salem, Oregon, Boston, a few from the DC, DMV area. Ooh, hi from Nova Scotia. I'm from
Ooh,
Maine.
somebody's in Springfield, Missouri. My sister lives there.
There you go.
Go Springfield Correctional Center, federal prison. That's where my sister works. She doesn't live there. She works there.
Greenville, North Carolina. We love you, Teddy Bear CAC. You guys do great work up there. Rexburg, Idaho, definitely on my bucket list. A couple people from Idaho. Well, welcome to those of you who are joining us. I want to continue to invite people to put your name, where you're from. I think it's, like I said, so incredible that we come together for these honest conversations. You know, we started these a couple years ago because we felt like a lot of people in this industry had there's some burning desire to talk about things that we don't necessarily talk about on a day-to-day basis. And this video series or webinar series is a chance for us to actually talk and have these open and honest conversations with experts about topics that are really stigmatized. And we've talked about everything from seeking therapy as a survivor, what it's like to be a survivor or do work in the Black, Latino, and Hispanic community. Today, we have the opportunity to talk about what it's like to work in the LGBTQ plus community. And so what we ask everyone is come with an open mind and an open heart, and make sure that even if you hear things that you disagree with, that you sit with them and try to understand where some of the experts are coming from. I would also offer, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you truly don't understand what they're talking about or want to dig in a little bit more about that, that's okay. And so I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we start. All participants are muted. And we are live streaming to Facebook as well as this Zoom feature. And so if you have a question, on Zoom, please put it in the Q&A section, and on Facebook, please put it in the comments. And we will definitely try to get to as many questions as we can towards the end of the webinar. This chat is for networking and comments. Like I said, introduce yourself, tell people where you're from, share some of the work that you're doing. We love to see other positive work out there, especially at those community-based organizations. I also want to say that we know that this can be triggering, particularly when you start talking about the intersectionality of these two topics. And so this is a safe place. And if you do need to talk to someone, Darkness to Light has two options, 1-866-4-LIGHT, and you can call that number and it's free. Or you can text the word LIGHT to 741-741. For those of you who are going to be dying to watch this again because it's such a great conversation, it will be available both on our Facebook and our YouTube channel after the event. On YouTube specifically, we will translate this to Spanish. So be sure to follow us on social media. We'll share it there. And there are going to be a few documents referenced throughout the course of the conversation. And those will also be available for each and every one of you. So again, before we start, I just wanted to remind everyone, please be respectful at all times. Some of these things are really difficult. We're all on different places in our journey, and we're here to learn and be open and honest and curious with each other. So without further ado, I would like to start off with a little bit of context setting. So we talk at Darkness to Light all the time about the fact that 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. And I just want to point out that 1 in 4 transgender youth will be abused before their 18th birthday. And LGB youth are almost 4 times as likely to experience CSA than their heterosexual peers. Darkness to Light is committed to the safety of all children, including our most vulnerable youth. And given the statistics that I just shared, it's critical that we have this conversation today about child sexual abuse in the LGBTQ+ community, because all kids deserve to be safe from harm. And as part of this commitment, it's important that we remain dedicated to continuing to learn. Leading us today in our education are 2 dedicated LGBTQ allies, and we'll discuss today how we can provide safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth, which is an incredibly important foundation to child sexual abuse prevention. As we were putting together the panel and discussion questions for this honest conversation, we realized that language would be an important starting point in our discussion today. And the reason I say that is because we have planned that there will be more than one conversation, similar to how we've done a few conversations in other communities. And we acknowledge and understand, in that terms and vocabulary related to the LGBTQ+ community for many are still new. And therefore it might be confusing and you might need definitions. Please don't hesitate to either Google while you're listening or to ask in the chat for people to define it for you. And we hope that starting this conversation here creates more comfortability with the language, which is an important part of building a necessary trust system in order to be able to build that safe community. And so without further ado, you can stop listening to me, and I would love for our 2 panelists today to introduce themselves. Stephanie Lang, you are a student assistant specialist and the district sex education supervisor in Detroit. And so I would love for you to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and what you do.
Well, thanks, Katelyn. I appreciate you having me here today and getting to meet Ricardo as well. So I'm a social worker here. I'm actually in Macomb County, Michigan, which is a little bit north of Detroit. There's like Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne. We're like the tri-county area over here in southeastern Michigan. And I'm currently at Dakota High School, which is part of the Chippewa Valley school system. We are the largest high school in Michigan right now, with over 3,000 students on our campus, grades 9 through 12. And so I'm the at-risk youth specialist there and in charge of the sex education advisory board committee for my district. So in the state of Michigan, and I know also in other states, but there are a lot of rules and laws that surround sex education. And so those are also very near and dear to my heart, in making sure that we are having as inclusive of sex education programming as we can to really include all students, which does include LGBTQ students. So that's another one of my passions. I also work for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. I'm their trauma content expert on our website for training, improving. It's called Improving My Practices, MI for Michigan. It's supposed to be kind of cool. And family psychoeducation, which is an adult evidence-based practice for people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, which is interesting how all my worlds, it might not sound like they all work together in a really exciting tapestry, but they really do. So that's a little bit about me. I have 2 kids. One of them is transgender and also gay. He's now an adult. He's 21, a pretty awesome kid. And that's what kind of got me really to open my eyes about this very important issue. Probably about 10 years ago is when I really dove in deeply in the community here, Katelyn.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really honored to have you here. And Ricardo, I would love for you to talk about your work at the LGBT Center in Los Angeles.
Great, thank you, Katelyn, and hello again, Stephanie. I'm Ricardo De Leon. I am the CFO at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. And a real quick question I would imagine that comes to people's minds, so what is the CFO doing on this call? Because it's not really a call about finance, it's a call about our community, the LGBT community. At the Los Angeles LGBT Center as CFO, I've been here 2.5 years. A little background about the Los Angeles LGBT Center. We are in Los Angeles, we have 10 sites. We have about 750 employees. Our annual budget is about $155 million, and we're growing. The center is just absolutely amazing. I actually moved from Cincinnati to Los Angeles specifically for this job, given the need that the community had for additional services. August 2020, during COVID, I was living in Cincinnati. A search firm called and said, would you consider this job? And I thought, what a great opportunity. During COVID, let me move to the epicenter of COVID and actually put my skills to work. So here, I mentioned what the center, who works at the center, but we do housing, we do cultural arts, we do pharmacy, we do clinic, we do youth services, senior services. We feed hundreds of people every single day, and we house hundreds of people every day. And it's a great place to work, given the need that's out there for these types of services. Prior to being here at the LGBT Center, I had 25 years or so of corporate experience, different work experience at other nonprofits. I've been in the Darkness to Light board for 4+ years now, and happy to be contributing and giving my perspective on this topic moving forward.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Ricardo's an incredible human, a great board member, and we're so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we actually, the Darkness to Light board hosted their most recent board meeting in Los Angeles, and we were able to tour the center, and it was really incredible. I mean, just, he talks about what they're doing there, but I don't even know if you can truly understand the depth of what they do until you see it. So, Ricardo, I'm going to start with this question about language that I sort of alluded to in my opening. It's so important that we understand the distinction of some of these terms. And so can you go into the difference between, say, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender expression? I mean, these all seem very gray for people who aren't in it every day. Like, what does all of that mean?
It's a great way to start, because identity is so key to individuals in this community. And I have, like, through my own life experience and working, I had what I thought these definitions were, but you always have to go back to Google and confirm, because things evolve. And it was interesting, because going into Google and defining some of these terms also highlights how, number one, they evolve, and number two, there's so many different perspectives on it. Gender identity, as an example. Gender identity is a person's innate sense of their gender. And it's usually being used when it's different than what the gender was when he, she, they were born. And just thinking about that. So it becomes important when it's not aligned with the gender that you were assigned when you were born. And it's like, wow, so how does that happen? And then you dig a little bit further, and looking at different articles that are available, there's one that talked about 6 gender identities. There's one that talked about 7. There was one that talked about 3. There was one that talked about 5. And it's just such an evolving area. But ultimately, it's what a person identifies as. Gender expression, different than gender identity, is what he, she, they express themselves as a gender. And this is typically how they dress, how they behave, how they appear. It isn't always aligned with their gender identity. It would be how the person feels that he, she, they could best be them at their 100%. Sexual orientation, different than the first two, speaks specifically to what gender is the individual sexually attracted to. And that's the first time that it really brings in the 3-letter word sex, in that who are you attracted to, which could be different and could be surprising based on how you express yourself. And it could be different than how you identify yourself. And so you got to be able to look at a person in different dimensions and understand that it may not be what you assume. So understanding these 3 different terms becomes really important.
And so with gender, what does cisgender mean? I'm sure that a lot of people have heard the term cisgender.
Cisgender is the gender that corresponds with the gender that was assigned at birth.
Right. So for instance, I am a cisgender lesbian woman. So I identify with the gender I was given at birth. My sexual orientation is gay or lesbian. And I identify, or my gender expression is a femme woman, a feminine woman. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Listen, I mean, I think as being part of the LGBTQ plus community, even I, like, you know, what the kids, the Gen Zers are sort of identifying and teaching us is different than when I was young and learning about myself and my expression and who I was sexually attracted to, etc. And so even those of us who are within the community still have learning and curiosity that we need to hold on to in order to be able to have, you know, informed conversations. Stephanie?
Well, Katelyn, I think it's really important what you said also, because there's two things that I was thinking that I'm around teenagers all day, every day for 24 years, right? So I'm always kind of like getting in, they're teaching me everything. I'm following their lead. So I just found out a few years ago that you can have sexual attraction and then romantic attraction, and they might not be the same thing. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm not that exciting. You know, I kind of, for me, those are the same thing, but for some people, they're not. So I got to learn about that as being an additional identity that some people hold as an important piece of who they are. The other thing that I learned about this, that what you just said made me think about, is the fact that with the acronym of LGBT, and Ricardo, please say more about this, but I think it's confusing to people because LGB are sexual orientations and T is a gender identity. So some people are like, what? I thought that if you came out as transgender that you were also automatically gay or whatever. And people kind of confuse your sexual orientation and your gender identity and kind of think they're the same thing. So yeah, you really got to slow down. And I sometimes will ask a student, tell me, what do you mean by that? You know, they'll say, I'm pansexual. And like person A might say they're pansexual and person B might say they're pansexual. And I would ask them, tell me more about what that means to you. And it might not mean the exact same thing to these two people, which is also interesting. I don't know. What do you think about that, Ricardo? Have you experienced those kinds of things as well? Where Googling doesn't really help me, I'm not going to lie.
No, you know, to me, it all comes back to the individual's identity, and it can get really complex, and that there are many different dimensions, and the dimensions can get confusing, and you know, the complexity itself can scare people away from making an effort of trying to understand who the person actually is, and that's what I get fearful of, is that with all these different ways that folks can identify themselves, and we forget who the person actually is at the end of the day.
Right.
But yes, I do know the complexities. There could be a gay man who decides to make a change and become a transgender woman, who then, as a transgender woman, identifies as straight because she is attracted to men. And so that evolution of the individual, she ends up as a transgender woman attracted to men, and she started off as a gay male. And again, I mean, I hesitate to talk about the complexities because complexities scare people away from understanding who the person is. And whoever this person is, he, she, they deserves to be understood as they stand in front of whoever they're interacting with.
Ricardo, you really nailed it right there. And I've seen this happen time and time again with young people that I work with. We think it's confusing to us. It's confusing to the person on this journey, you know, and I just try to support them wherever they are. And the thing that really, I think, can hurt people in the LGBT community more than anything else is when a cisgender, a cis-het like me, cisgender heterosexual woman, especially white, I'm like all the things that are, you know, but anyways, comes in and says, oh, well, that child must just be so confused. They don't even know who they are. It's a journey. It's not for me to judge, decide, you know, but to be able to understand that this child can confuse within their own journey, whether this is a gender identity issue or a sexual orientation issue. That can be a real thing. I mean, think about adults, you know, you're 50 and you don't even for sure know your sexual orientation, or you're not being honest with the world about your sexual orientation because it's scary. Imagine how scary it is to that child. Because one of the activities I do, I don't know, Ricardo, if you've ever done this, I have people close their eyes and I have you think back in time. When did you have your first crush? And almost always people are having a crush on someone before the 5th grade. And you know whether or not that was a boy or a girl that you had a crush on. So it's insulting, you know, to tell folks that this is, you know, they're confused or they're going to grow out of it. It's a phase. It's very, very hurtful to folks and to make assumptions like that. So I love that you said that about the complexities of it, because I think it does need to be honored and recognized, but not to create fear, to create support and understanding around it. Sorry, Katelyn, I know I went on a horrible tangent. I hope you don't have hives over there. Okay.
You're fine. Listen, these are part of the conversations that people want to have or want to hear other people having. It's not, I think what I hope the audience is hearing is that grace and curiosity and positive intent in your learning and your ability to navigate these acronyms, it's not just you, it's a lot of people around you. And so it's okay to ask questions with, you know, with sincere intent to learn. And so I want to touch on this one more time before we move on to the next question. Stephanie, we've seen LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA, you know, there's like so many different ways that the acronym sort of either grows, shrinks, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc. Can you sort of just define a little bit what each one of those are, like very brass tacks basic?
Yeah, I can say that, you know, the L is lesbian, and that's typically a woman who has a sexual attraction or maybe a romantic and a sexual attraction to other women. I think the word lesbian is fairly common. It's not a brand new word like a cisgender word. And then gay, I really love how gay is being now used as more of an umbrella for anyone who is attracted to someone of the same sex or gender as them, as opposed to, you know, some people don't realize that words also get out. They're, you know, out. So like homosexual is not a word we want people to use anymore. It's out. And I know there's a lot of people, especially generationally, who will continue to use that word. And it's even on some of our people's agency paperwork, which I say, please take that off your paperwork. If that's part of your data collection, I got to send you to the Fenway Institute so you can learn about some proper LGBTQ data collection, because that's going to turn a client off immediately to know that you are uninformed and not a great place to be. So, well, thank you. I sometimes do that. So then, okay, bisexual. I love, there's a great TED Talk if anybody cares. And I also turned in my #1 document that's labeled #1 honest conversation is part of the safe zone training that's put out. It's a curriculum that people use. I use it all the time in my world, in schools and whatnot. And it has a really great specific core glossary there for these words. Plus it has what are the out words that we don't want to say anymore and why. It explains why are these words falling out of favor with folks in the LGBTQ community. And what is, because I think when we really understand the why of it, we try extra hard not to use things that we know are hurtful. But bisexuality is, I almost kind of say it's got an invisibility problem. And even within the LGBTQ community, that it is, it's a problem, because people that are identifying as bisexual are sometimes targeted or excluded, or I don't know how to explain it, but there's this whole bisexual invisibility issue that I feel like this gal says it so well in this TED Talk. If you Google bisexual invisibility TED Talk, you're going to find her. And it's so powerful because people make an assumption, you know, if I'm married to a man, so if I show up somewhere, people are going to assume all of a sudden I'm heterosexual. You're either gay or you're straight. Most people will make that assumption. There's all this whole world of sexuality out there that's not covered in those two things.
Mhm.
So for people who are bisexual, then I have to decide, am I going to come out? Am I going to say something? Am I not going to say? Why would I say something? It kind of puts people in a really vulnerable, uncomfortable position. And when we're thinking about protecting our youth, we don't want to put them in those situations either when we're trying to form connections and relationships with them and give them that safe space. Queer is another word that a lot of people, depending on how old you are, that word, I got in so much trouble for putting queer in an email once. And I was just spelling out LGBTQ, like what it stood for. I got really in trouble by this older gentleman who was not happy about that. And I had to explain it to him. I didn't just make that up and put it in the email, like legit, that's what the Q stands for. And this is how it's being reclaimed by young people. And I'm so sorry that this word was used to hurt you. I wasn't trying to trigger you in the middle of your workday. So I have to really know my audience, and I have to know for sure if this is going to be safe. And if I'm going to be able to, provide that. So Anthony, are you saying the link doesn't work? Because you should scroll down. That's the participant guidebook. That's all it is. If you guide through it, you'll find, like, I think on page 3 is the core vocabulary, and then it goes down to words that, yes, keep going. Thank you, Tracy. So I don't know if that helps or not, because intersex people are also lost in this whole equation many times. I love it when someone wants to stand up and say, and God made them male and female. And I say, and intersex, don't forget, it's not that simple. People want to make things really simple and use logic and just but it's not. We're human beings. Like Ricardo said, we're human beings and we're complicated. And being an intersex person is as common as redheads. Katelyn, did you know that?
I did.
As common as being a redhead, and people don't know that these folks exist. These are real people.
They are real people. And I will tell you, my sister is a redhead, and she is very proud to be less common or as common as intersex people. We joke about that all the time, actually. Yes, exactly.
Bring it. Yes.
So Ricardo, let's talk about some other words, because we haven't given them enough definitions. I want to talk about the use of pronouns. I mean, this has come on in a very intense way in the last 5 years, and a lot of people are having a sort of a visceral pushback to it. Can you tell me what is the point behind the they, them, and why is it important that we all adopt the usage of our own pronouns?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and knowing it was coming up, I did some serious thinking about the pronouns and the use of pronoun. And I thought back, it's like all of us on this call, when we were going through our educational process, learned early a boy is a he, a girl is a she, and a group is them or they.
Yep.
And that's what we learned. And in all the different books, Jack, he, Karen, she, there was a very, very clear distinction. And I can't recall what grade we're in when we're learning these things, but we're being taught very early the pronouns that were the traditional pronouns and the traditional use. It made me think through, if there's a young child who's growing up and is being told Mark is a he, and that particular youth doesn't feel like a he. That particular youth feels like a she. The youth feels different. He doesn't fit the box of the he. And through that person's journey, the turmoil that could be there on trying to find their identity, and the challenge of not fitting in with the he pronoun that's being assigned to that person. I think that happens a lot more often than people think. And today, we have folks that have gone through that process and have determined as adults or later in life what pronoun they want to be called. And at that point in time, it becomes very personal. It becomes personal because they've had to struggle with what they considered being called something that didn't fit them. And it's a claim to identity to claim a pronoun that is different than the pronoun that people assume you are. Now, if you were born a he and you identify a he, it's a non-issue, and you think it's nothing. I mean, why are people getting so carried away with pronouns? but that person never had the turmoil of being told over and over and over and over that they are a he when they don't feel like a he, or a she when they don't feel like a she. And so when the person comes to the determination on the pronoun that they want to be called, it is a very, very personal decision. And you know, they put it in their name tags. They put it on they put it on their chest. And that's what they want to be called. And some folks can think it's going overboard and why this and why that, but it's totally dismissing the journey a person goes through to find their own identity. And so I'm still learning. I still get confused. I still make assumptions, but I quickly correct when someone corrects me. It's like, no, I prefer to be called this other pronoun, and then I adopt it. Now, to your specific question on they, them, that would be for like non-binary. That would be for folks that don't want to be classified. I interact with a couple of my other nonprofits where I have an individual that goes by they. I know people here at the center that go by they, and it's because they just don't want to be classified. They want, they're non-binary, they're asexual, they are fluid. They are what they are. The thing is, once they make the claim as to what they would like to be called, that we should make every effort to remember it and respect it.
I love that. So I'm going to step away from language a bit and kind of focus on, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people like me who are listening to this and identifying with it because we've been through that journey, right? You know, I transitioned from feeling comfortable being outwardly bi to outwardly gay. And bi was sort of my way of saying, like, I am here, but I'm not ready to fully admit to my family or, you know, even admit to myself that I'm just not interested in the social norm, right? And so, which is another reason, and we could have a whole conversation on that about why bi is problematic for both the gay community and the straight community. But I want to talk about allyship because, you know, in that personal example, my best friends have been there all along the way, respecting me, maybe not understanding, but respecting and using the words that I'm using to them back to me. And so can you talk about, you know, you work with youth every day, all day long, Stephanie, can you talk about what it means to be a good ally and how you can continue to learn and grow and be empathetic as an ally?
Yeah, so Katelyn, I really think you've already touched on the key points in my experience. And if you want to drop in the chat number 2 document, which is the PFLAG Guide to Being a Straight Ally, there's a lot of really great resources in there. And I think the number one thing I've learned is follow the lead of the person you're talking to. Stay curious, which you already mentioned. Do not make assumptions about the other person. If you make a mistake, do not make a giant deal out of it. There's nothing that the kids hate more than you go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought I was going to remember that and that, you know, just, oh, wow. Okay. Yep. It's a he, or I have students who have, I mean, if you think about how long it takes, if you've ever had a kid, or if you've had a pet, okay, let's just make it, if you've never had a kid, if you're a cat parent or a dog parent, how much effort you put into naming that and making a name for that, because it's meaningful to you. People spend years, they fight over names of this stuff, right? And now here you've got a child who knows, like Ricardo, what you were saying, this doesn't feel right to me. And they have to now try to figure out how to name themselves something that feels right to them. So I'll have kids who, you know, I want to be Oliver, I want to be Jasper, I want to be Star Cloud, I want to be whatever. And then after a week, they're like, oh, you know what? That doesn't feel right. I don't know what to do. And they want to try a different name. And there are adults who get really frustrated with that. It's not your problem. It really doesn't affect you, except you need to write it on a piece of paper and you need to remember it. That's all we're asking you to do. Not judge them, not make, you know, gossip and rumors about them or question what's going on with them. Be supportive. It doesn't affect you. And that's what I try to tell some of these adults. It's like, you're really upset about this. This is telling me a lot about you and not very much about this kid, actually. Parent, they love it when I say that, but it's the truth. If it's bothering you so much that someone else is LGBTQ or having a journey with their sexual orientation or gender identity, this is about you. You know, I got time for a session. Do you? You know, that's what I try to tell people. This is an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself. And I genuinely mean that. This could be an opportunity for people who are that upset about this, because the kids are just kids, you know. During our latest school board election, I got accused of being an indoctrinator of the kids. And the kids, we have these glitter wands at school that we use for, you know, resetting ourselves and all that. And the kids were getting it out and saying that it was Mrs. Lang's magic wand because I'm turning the kids gay and stuff at school. And they thought it was so funny. And the kids say, you know, Mrs. Lang, if walking in your room would make me gay, I wouldn't come in your room. I can't believe that people think that we want to do this and that this is something we're choosing as a lifestyle. This is going to, although it can be exciting and fulfilling, it's going to disrupt my entire life. It's not easy to do. This is hard. Talk about, you know, being courageous and having bravery, you know, being able to be your authentic self in the face of a society, which is extremely challenging. You know, people think, oh, being LGBTQ makes you depressed and anxious and suicidal. No, it doesn't. It's the way the United States of America treats you because you're not cis het, you know, and yeah, I don't play. I saw someone put that in the chat. I do not play after all this time because kids' lives depend on it. Their safety and their life depends on us being willing to be allies in the situation. It's extremely serious and it does change lives. And that is really cool. That's my superpower.
I'm not sure there's anything else to say, Stephanie. I think that's the end of the conversation.
Oh, it's never the end. Are you kidding me?
I mean, but truly, mic drop. I mean, you know, again, I think that there are a lot of people here who have had and gone through that experience. I think there are people maybe who haven't, who are sitting on this and thinking, wow, she's really passionate about that. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with how passionate she is about that. And again, you know, as we talked about in the beginning of the conversation, I ask you to sit with that, like sit with that discomfort. And you may come out and not ultimately agree with everything Stephanie said, but you might find your way to the next place in your journey in working with the LGBTQ community and understanding, you know, what is happening in people's lives, particularly children's lives. And, you know, we haven't done a lot today talking about child sexual abuse and the intersectionality because we really wanted this to be a very a basic conversation about just what the LGBTQ group is in general. But for those of you that are practitioners and are here because of the child sexual abuse component of this, think about the isolation that Stephanie just talked about and think about the misgendering and the dead naming, you know, and all of that transgender youth are feeling. And then on top of that, feeling isolated and being sexually abused as a child. And we went to a place at the beginning where we said 1 in 4 transgender kids or youth are abused before their 18th birthday. And LGBT youth are 4 times more likely to experience CSA. And, you know, it's not just sexual abuse, honestly, it's bullying, it's all of that. So when you find someone that really likes you, that pays attention to you, that's giving you gifts, that is taking you to places and driving you and, you know, answering your text messages, you feel like it's the light of the world. And of course, you're going to spend your time with them and want them to pay attention to you. And before you know it, you're in a situation, unfortunately, where there's an abuse of power. And unfortunately, sexual abuse is rife in those situations where there is an abuse of power. And so, Ricardo, I want to go back to the Los Angeles LGBT Center, because I think safe spaces are also an incredibly important conversation in this chat today. So can you talk about, I know you have a housing program, can you talk about that, but maybe also the fact that it's a safe space for youth who don't necessarily live at the center?
Yeah, definitely. We have several different developmental programs on top of housing. So let me speak there, and then I want to go back to the safe space. But we have transitional living, and then we have more permanent living. We have youth services where we have a GED program where we can help individuals get their education. We have different training programs on culinary skills, on other professional skills where we prepare individuals for real life. We have counselors on site. We try to make sure the individual has the skills he, she, they need in order to be successful in life. I see expense reports come through all the time where we're helping people with rent. We're helping people with Ubers and Lyfts to get to their medical appointments. We're helping people with buying groceries sometimes. We have a food pantry where we give people food. All these different things are to help for life skills and for long, successful, sustaining, contributing lives. For safe space, we have rooms where people can just be themselves, where they can go in, know that they can put their defenses down, where everyone in the room is being supportive, where they can relax. And they coming into that type of environment is so welcomed. When you're when you're not in that environment otherwise, that safe space means so much for people just to be able to put their defenses down. We try to do that as often as possible. I mentioned we have 10 different locations. We try to create that space everywhere we are. The value of safe space, what I'm going to pivot a little bit, because I think about when the safe space is violated and why it's taken so personally. And I think of Club Q. I think of those hate crimes that come through where folks are in their safe space, they're having a good time, their defenses are down, and why it means so much when it's violated, it becomes so personal. And I've been at, we had World's AIDS Day just 13 days ago. We had Transgender Day of Remembrance the week before that. Here at the center and then here in town, there were different ceremonies to recognize, to pay tribute to individuals who have been victims. And I have to bring the two together because when you sit at a Transgender Day of Remembrance and you hear 100 names being called out of individuals that were killed, largely because of who they were, and candle by candle, a person reads the name, lights a candle, next person comes through. It's just become so powerful on the vulnerabilities and the importance of having a safe space, and the violation when that safe space is disrupted. And it's just a horrible situation. I mean, the people are going through things that are above and beyond obstacles that are above and beyond what we know, what we would know in our own personal lives, and being able to provide safe spaces where folks can actually go and have defenses down and then keep those safe spaces safe is one of the main objectives of the center.
I was too busy listening and I forgot to take myself off mute. That was powerful, Ricardo, and definitely, I think, very relatable for those of us who have had our safe space violated in some way. So before we go to questions, we have about 5 more minutes of discussion. Stephanie, what Ricardo just talked about is wonderful, right? But somebody maybe from, I don't know, my hometown, Millinocket, Maine, really 5,000 people, not exactly LA, and you may or may not want to be out. How do you teach someone to create safe space without that large community to be that place for LGBTQ plus youth?
Yeah, it's not easy, Katelyn, to be honest. Ricardo, when you were speaking about Club Q, aside from it being heartbreaking and absolutely just a terrible circumstance, I feel like children's safe space gets violated on a regular basis, not to the extreme. Obviously, dying is an extreme form of invading your safe space and having that life or death. But for some children, I feel like how we handle bias incidents with children in a setting, whether it's our agency setting, whatever setting we're in, school setting. So if somebody were to, for example, say a slur, I don't want to say slurs on here. I know sometimes I was doing it for examples and I was real upsetting people, so I'm not going to do that anymore. But so somebody calls another kid a name, but just they're playing around. It's not meant to be a slur. Do adults look the other way? Do adults address it? You know, how is it managed? And kids are watching, kids are paying attention. They may not be so upset by the fact of what the actual slur was, although they might. What they're really watching for is Ricardo going to take that person aside and have a conversation with them and help them think a little bit about how that could impact other people? I do the same thing at my school when it comes to suicide, because some kids will be like, oh, I'm just going to kill myself if I don't pass that test. Now, if you've never had a traumatic incident around loss by suicide or a suicide attempt or whatever, you may not think about that. But if you have, see, so it's the same thing. Taking it as a teachable moment to talk to that young person about how their words are so powerful, that helps us to create a safe space, along with, you know, the stickers, the buttons. I don't have my whole lanyard on today. It looks like I work at TGI Fridays for people who used to remember all that, but I have a lanyard with my pronoun pin and my free mom hugs and my rainbow and all my unicorn and all the stuff that's always around my neck, with the stickers around my door frame and the safe space sign, you know, anything like that on your website, you know, like obviously, Ricardo, it's in the name of your center, but other centers, like we have other centers where they're open and affirming. But if you don't have that listed very clearly on your website, if I'm somebody in the LGBT community and I'm not sure if I should go to your site or not, I'm going to go to your website and I'm going to see if there's anything that specifically tells me I'm welcome and safe there. And if it doesn't, I'm going to look for another place. So you could be the most open and affirming agency or resource in the community that ever was. But I'm not going to trust it because I've been burned and unsafe too many times. And that includes doctor's offices, crisis facilities, dentists. I don't care what it is. You need to be very obvious because it's too traumatic and it's not worth it to be dead named or to be judged or to give the side eye about, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. We had enough problems in the day without that. Yeah. So be really obvious. And the Family Acceptance Project has great resources. The Fenway Institute has great resources. There's a lot of great resources out there that could help you with that, about how to make your space safer. You have art, you know, that reflects, it's not always like a man and a woman holding hands. Like, I love what Delta has done. Has anybody seen what Delta has done? The two dudes that are, you know, kind of cuddling in the seat to go on a trip. You don't have to say, hey, we're LGBT friendly. Have two dudes that are going on vacation together, cuddling in their seat. That says it all. It's beautiful. I was so excited going down the jet bridge the other day with my son who's gay, you know, just, yeah, go Delta. There's a lot of companies that are really going out there. Hallmark, you know, some other companies that have gone out of their way to make sure that they're representing a lot of people in the community. And that's what we need, is representation. They've been looking at straight couples forever. You know, let's get past that. That's good.
We have been looking at straight couples for a long time.
That's right. Family Acceptance Project. I can put it in the chat for people.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Absolutely.
You are a gem. I have to tell you, there are some really incredible questions. Honestly, we could host honest conversations about some of these questions for an hour. And so for those of you who have put in your questions, thank you so much. I am not going to get to all of these in 10 minutes with these two wonderful panelists, but I think, you know, one of the questions that seems to be threaded through is a lot of people are really worried about the politics around the LGBTQ community right now. One question, for instance, is like, do you have to be an LGBTQ advocate to be an ally? I think some people might argue yes, some people might argue no, but I would love, you know, Stephanie and Ricardo, for you to ponder that question.
if you're being an ally, you are being an advocate. I mean, you don't have to go speak on the stairs in Washington, D.C. or at your state capitol to be an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of advocates needed in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So by being an ally, guess what? Sorry to tell you, you're already an advocate. I don't think you can separate them. I think it just has to do with the degree of exposure that you can have in your life. Not everybody can be out in terms of totally exposing yourself in an advocacy way. You know, I couldn't go march on the steps of Lansing when we were having a big march in Michigan because I was afraid of losing my job. I would have to take the day off of school to do it. If somebody videotaped me and put it on social media, I was afraid I would lose my job. So I couldn't go. That's an advocacy thing I wasn't able to do. So I picked something else that I could do. It's all
Like
degrees.
on Honest Conversations.
I mean, Ricardo, what do you think? The degree of advocacy, I think, is a broad range, a broad continuum, just like our sexuality.
No, I would agree. I mean, I look at ally being more focused on the individual and making him, her, she, they comfortable, and then advocacy more being external and talking issues with other folks. But if you're doing the former, just the latter comes out naturally. But ally to me is personal, advocate is external.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I really like that perspective, Ricardo, because I was thinking it was just kind of to a degree, you know, because as a straight ally, I guess I feel, I don't know, there might be a different, and again, this might be how people identify themselves. If you don't want to call yourself an advocate, but you want to be an ally, you know, have at it. But I love that internal, external thing. I'm going to use that, Ricardo. I will make sure that I attribute it to you, but I'm using that.
Go for it.
Well, and I would just add, you know, I really liked your point, Stephanie, about making choices, you know, based on what you can and can't do. And for many years, I had internal conversations with my team members that I really do want to focus on, you know, historically marginalized communities, particularly the LGBTQ plus community. But I also, as a member of the community, don't want it to look like a pet project. So how do we do it so it is inclusive of all of, you know, other historically marginalized communities, and, you know, and also balance, there are communities who aren't as comfortable with the LGBTQ community. Their children deserve to be just as safe as any other community too. So how do you support, as a national organization, everyone involved? Because kids fundamentally at Darkness to Light deserve a healthy and happy childhood. And so having these conversations where politics stays out of it and we really get to the crux of what this is about, which is safe kids, to me is the most important part of this conversation. And there hasn't been one of these webinars where we haven't talked about empathy and curiosity and just continuing to learn. And I think that to me is the cross-cutting theme of how you engage with, you know, with communities that maybe aren't your own and keep kids safe, and act as an ally. And you don't necessarily have to be an advocate. And that, you know, it's something we all sort of live by at Darkness to Light. Whatever we do in our personal lives is our personal lives, but at Darkness to Light, the safety of children is the most important thing. So, all right, let's see, what are some of these other amazing questions? Let's actually talk a little bit more about CSA. So one of the questions is, how is this conversation related to the prevention of CSA? And how can I use these learnings to prevent abuse of LGBTQ plus children?
I have one thing that I can say about that. And then Ricardo, I'll be fast. I can see we're running out of time, but understanding that it's a basic human need for everyone to feel connected to another human being. And a child who senses that they're being rejected by the world because of who they are extra sensitive to that. And they're seeking a safe adult, a safe connection with someone else for their support. If we can be that safe person and we can help guide them, it might prevent them from being sucked into the life of a predator who is looking to hurt them. I think predators, and you might have talked about this in other venues, but predators are really, really keen to being able to seek out that vulnerable youth who's looking for the connection and take that spot. So I try to take that spot before they can take that spot. and teach them about healthy connections and have a conversation, because they are one of our most vulnerable populations, because they are so hungry for that connection and searching to be accepted. And I try to teach them that. I know they think that they're not going to make a mistake. They think they're, 13 going on 30 or whatever. Not that 30-year-olds are always the most able to detect a toxic relationship or whatever anyways, but I'm just saying, to have an open, honest conversation with them about that space inside of them that's looking for the connection, make them more aware of it. So I don't know, Ricardo, what do you think?
Oh, I would agree with everything you said. And just to be able to entertain other questions, I won't add anything more because you've said it, and I'll let Katelyn get to the next question.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. This one's a long one, so bear with me. Our CAC supports LGBTQIA+ people in simple ways, such as symbols, equality rainbows, gender unicorn. We ask for pronouns. We have a very positive response from our youth, and they report feeling safe. But is there other things that we should be thinking about so children and their caregivers feel seen and heard and safe? So this is specifically in a CAC setting. We also walk the line with the caregiver when the caregiver is not affirming or supportive, which can be difficult sometimes. So I think the general question here is, what else can they do beyond sort of value signaling to the individuals who walk through their CAC door that they are supportive?
Yeah, I would say look for that individual that is withdrawn, because all those different actions that were voiced, that you noted, are great actions. They're positive, they're affirming, and definitely supportive of them. But there could still be individuals that don't associate with that they're looking for something different. And in my mind, I've heard a phrase one time that an individual withdraws because they don't feel like they belong. And for whatever reason they feel they don't belong, they don't belong, and they're withdrawing. Go find out why they are withdrawing. Go talk to the person and see what their needs are, and see how you can be helpful of that. Because just like we can't stereotype population A, we can't stereotype population B either. And if somebody doesn't belong, feels like they don't belong and is withdrawing, just go reach out to that person and see how you can help.
Well, we have 2 minutes left, and so I would like to say one thing before I give last comment to both of our amazing panelists today. And that is, there will be 2 more, hopefully, sessions within the next few months that delve into other topics specifically related to the LGBTQ+ community. So if you're watching on Facebook and you don't get Darkness to Light's emails, that's where you'll find a lot of our announcements. So sign up for our emails. We also have social media, and we'll announce our honest conversations on social media. You can find us on LinkedIn. Obviously, you found us on Facebook or Instagram. And so I just want to say, Stewards of Children is applicable for all children. And so the basis of this conversation is for you to be able to take Stewards of Children, our training, and to apply it after conversations like this with additional visibility of vulnerabilities that some communities have. And so I want everyone to walk away knowing that what they've learned in Stewards of Children is still affirming for the LGBT community, but the information you got today helps you sit in those communities either as a better ally, a better facilitator, a better instructor, etc. So, Ricardo, I'd love to give you your last thought.
Oh, I'm going to listen to the next 2 sessions as well. Hopefully this was of help to folks. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about respecting an individual's identity. And hearing him, her, them for who they are. And I'll just leave it at that.
I love that. Stephanie?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really grateful that you found me. I think you guys found me at the ATN conference, the Attachment and Trauma Network, which I was selected to be one of the pre-conference half-day breakouts to do an ally training. I'm so excited.
Yay.
So I'll be in Houston a day early this year to do ally training. I'm just excited to be meeting so many people that are wanting to learn about this and wanting to help children, because children need adults. They're not little birds that we kick out of the nest after a week or two. You know, they need us for a really, really long time, and they're watching us.
Yeah.
And the more cool things we can do, the more open-minded we can be, the more curious we can be, it's going to help them make it to adulthood and be a really cool contributing part of society. And that's really important. We should all care about that. They're going to be taking care of us someday. They're going to be the leaders of this world, and we want to just help them be themselves. It's really important. So thanks a lot, Katelyn. It was great to meet you, Ricardo.
You as well. Thank you.
Just a quick shout out to Darkness Slate's comms team, particularly Tracy Leonard, who is the woman that found you. She's incredible. She wrote a lot of the questions today. She's done a lot of work, and she really cares about this topic. So shout out to my team. Thank you so much. And again, please sign up if you're interested in hearing about the next two. Stephanie, Ricardo, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, Katelyn, can you make sure Tracy drops the coming out handbook into the chat, the number 4 handout, because that's 100%. Really important for people to know. And I wanted to say, Ricardo, congratulations for getting out of Cincinnati. You know how Michigan people dislike it. Oh, how I hate Ohio State. So you got free of Ohio. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now I know why they were talking about you for 2 days on Discord, Stephanie. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye, everybody.